We're going to call the McLean County Zoning Board open. Will the secretary call the roll?
Judd. Maynard.
Here.
Kurtz.
Here.
Dean.
Here.
Turner.
Here.
Zimmerman.
Here.
Finnegan.
Here.
Carlton.
Here.
Taylor.
Here.
We have a quorum plus one. I mean, actually, a quorum for us is 5. But in all these meetings, you notice we've had 8 members. And just in case somebody got sick, we'd have at least 7 at the closing. So Mary Beth has been very well. She hasn't asked any questions. Has been here observing mostly. But we had to have her. We wanted to have 7 p.m. possibly. So just want to make that point clear.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. Last night we kind of got out of order a little bit with clapping and stuff. We do not allow that here. I didn't say much to you last night because I just didn't want to make a big deal out of it. But tonight, we've been very respectful to you. You've told us all your information. We will be deliberating tonight on this case, and the audience has to be quiet. We got to hear what we're doing. If it gets out of hand, we will do something more to take care of the problem. And I don't want to do that, but we're prepared to. So just let us talk and get it, and we'll get to a point here eventually. So we're at the point last night, everything was closed, and we're down to deliberation, if you haven't been here. And I'm going to open it up to the board to bring out points that they want to talk about. And I think there might be a few questions.
I have a couple of questions of staff, if I could put those out there. Are there any current wind farms that are current on taxes or that are behind on taxes?
No, they're all paid up to date.
Okay. At this point, I don't think the wind farms have been around long enough, and I'm not even sure that we handle any decommissioning money, but do we have any decommissioning money in escrow?
In the previous wind farm cases, the escrow was handled by the property owners themselves, and the county was not involved.
Okay, but due to the new agricultural agreement, we are involved in this one?
That's correct.
Okay. And in the past, was it necessary, I know under our current agricultural agreement, it's necessary, the county has to be notified if a wind farm is sold. In the past, have we been notified if a wind farm is sold?
Our office has not been notified when they've sold the wind farm.
And then, is there any need when a wind farm is sold, the decommissioning funds? I assume that transfers to the new company. So is that understood in the contract, or is there a need for us to stipulate when it's sold?
Well, in our ordinance, they're required to pass with the property. So if it gets sold or it gets assigned to someone else, the obligation goes with it.
Thank you.
I got an item or two. On the archaeology, somebody brought up the archaeology somewhere along the way, and I think that's assumed in our statute that if there's a significant archaeological site that is discovered in the area, they have part of the plan that's really outside of what we do. It's part of the overall process. They have an archaeologist submit a report. If there's any significant site, they basically just have to ignore that site. Is that correct? I'm trying to figure out if it's something that we have to say, or if there were something like that, that is just automatic.
It has to do with their historic preservation report. They are under consultation with them, and they have to continue that as part of it. That would be one of the conditions we would attach to to it, that they continue their consultation with historic preservation and satisfy that requirement.
Yeah, that's one of the requirements that really is outside of, we don't have to discuss that here, because if they don't pass it, it wouldn't work.
Well, they would have to do it. Yes.
Well, the two wind farms that are already in McLean County, has there been any complaints since they've been running, one way or other? I mean, any kind of thing that on record?
We did have issues with them during the construction, and you didn't really ask about that. And we would deal with the contractors if there were issues with transportation, or if somebody's road was messed up, or if somebody's driveway wasn't accessible. We would work with the contractors to try to get them help, get the owners help with that regard. But with respect to complaints of the wind farms since they've been operational, we received complaints about the transformers at the transform station with the wind farm out east, but we have not received noise complaints for the turbines themselves.
Thank you.
How many township roads are affected with this project?
I don't know the exact number on township roads. I think at one time it was like 70 miles of township roads, and we're looking at 21 miles of county highways.
Okay, that's how many commissioners are involved?
5.
Are they all up to speed with what, is the agreements in place? They've all signed off on them?
The township road agreement has not been submitted or signed off on by the road commissioners at this time. I think the applicant has reached out to the majority of the road commissioners, but there's been no agreement in place.
Is that coordinated through the county, or that's individual on their own?
They're individual on their own, but we're offering any advice or any suggestions that we might have.
We spent like 17 hearings going over our new rules back in November. I think it was 17. I repressed the memory because I think I was leading that. And then we had it given back to us. We went over a bunch more. We have these new, our own use regulations, and that's what we're basing any analysis on. Is that's correct? We don't have any outside standards beyond our own ordinances and what we reference.
We, in the past, have not had such specific regulations, and basically recommended more stipulations based on testimony of what we found at the public hearing, and based on what we've experienced in the past, and recommendations from what was then known as the Chicago Legal Clinic. That's got some of the standards that were in the staff report were thought to be added to what was actually required in the ordinance.
So the 17 nights that we put in is shortened this from maybe one of the last ones was much longer than this. So we haven't actually maybe had some benefit from this. We'll see how many, if anything comes through, we'd see how many stipulations we'd have here. And I think it was 37 stipulations for the last, something like that. So we'll see how well our ordinance works.
One thing I'd like to do this evening, Chairman, is to go through the DNR report. Do you have that, the staff have that in front of them?
Yes.
We go through those one by one and liturgy response. Does everyone have that as well? Okay.
Did you want to go through the recommendations? Is that what you're thinking?
Actually, I'm a little fuzzy on, I have Invergy's reply to the recommendations. And I think that Invergy has modified their recommendations as we moved along here somewhat. And so I want to get clear on what Invergy has modified, and what they haven't.
I think what their final recommendation was, or agreement was, included in that set of stipulations that Mr. Griffin submitted yesterday. And I think you have a copy of that.
Yep, fine.
If you need, we can make additional copies.
I was thinking maybe we could just go over that document. So I have that, I don't have the one from last night, I think is what I was going to get.
One of the things.
Okay, yeah, that one.
It was
Yeah.
exhibit 20.
This one.
Yes. So it's point number 6
Yeah.
on app, exhibit 20 that we're looking at.
Yes.
So they've agreed to slow the turbines for the bats on recommendation number 1. To curtail turbine operations below wind speeds of 5 meters per second during the period from July 15th through October 15th to conserve endangered, threatened, and non-listed bats. They've agreed to that?
Then on recommendation number 5, where it's 500 feet from perennial stream, they have one tower that's closer than that. Am I correct in thinking that way?
Yes. It's number 91 and it's approximately 300 feet.
Our ordinance, what I read, said that basically unless the applicant presented evidence as to why they shouldn't follow the idea in our recommendations, that our ordinance says that they shouldn't follow them. So just because they can't move and get it into the proper location because of FAA and the 1,500 foot setback and everything, I would say that number 91 needs to go away.
I would agree with eliminating 91. It's right on the edge of the floodplain. It's near Henline Creek, and it's one that's contributing to a nearby home's energy level that's in the top 5 there. So I just think eliminating that one would solve a lot of issues there.
I'd agree with that, probably.
We have another one that's in the, on the edge of the floodplain too, is it number 90?
Was that something that staff was gonna look into, whether it was really a floodplain or not, or you wouldn't be able to build in a floodplain anyway?
Correction area, that's 99.
Any of them that are in the floodplain, we would have to verify. You can't really tell with the scale of this map that they have, whether they're in the floodplain or not. And we would require them to verify that it's not in the floodplain before we'd issue a permit.
But 91 is only 300 feet from one of the perennial streams. That would be what, or number 91, that would be why I would be recommending that if it can't be moved because of the other regulations, then it should be moved to, because it can't comply with the IDNR recommendations.
Yeah, I don't think our rules are that we have to hear credible evidence that, and I'm not sure we heard any evidence other than it's really tough to move. And I don't consider that credible evidence why we would keep it. It's close to the Hemline Creek, which we have evidence that that is part of the part of the IDNR recommendation. That goes for one, plus it's we've got evidence that it's part of the Illinois Natural Areas Inventory as a really high quality area. So I don't see the credible evidence that we got is that we don't want to have a turbine within 500 feet of that, or disturbing the floodplain in any way. So I think eliminating it makes good sense.
And I think we're a little ahead of the game there as far as, should we approve this, it would be eliminated.
That was the point I wanted to make. We're talking about this, but we're only talking about it if it was actually approved. This is what would be your recommendation if it went to the approval process. So we kind of need to stipulate that on everything we talk about.
Yeah, we haven't gone for a stamp yet.
And then the only other recommendation that they're not in complete compliance with, if 91 would be eliminated, would be on number 2. They've agreed to study for 1 year rather than 3. And again, I'm in agreement. If we say meet the regulations, I don't feel that they provided any actual proof. They've said that through their experience, this is what they found, but I haven't seen any studies that show that.
Yeah, they brought experts in, and we don't have any credible evidence, like what gives. If you want to do something, give us evidence, and otherwise follow, if we were to approve this, we want to follow the IDNR regulations. We also, part of the reason we as a board are able to call people up to get a little more information, and we called up Dr. Angelo Caparella. Well, he's a bird man, maybe not a Batman, if I dare say that, is that he said the studies don't cost that much to do. It's not a huge burden on them. It's like, why protest something if it's not going to cost you much? In fact, if this were to be approved, I'd suggest that we'd rather insist and maybe specify that they do a 3-year study on whatever wildlife is necessary there. Because one, it's not going to cost them a whole lot, and 2, they can it'll show everybody yay or nay. They'll find a bunch of recommendations, and all the researchers will get a bunch of papers to print and publish while they're at it. So very little burden and a whole lot of gain for all concerned if we went ahead and approved that. And I see no credible evidence in the not study this.
Well, it would kind of seem like too that maybe we might see some ISU students who look for a project, and maybe it wouldn't cost much to get done. I'd like to see them get together and, maybe help each other in that regard.
So basically, to simplify it, if we do go forward, they've agreed to everything else, And we're basically saying that if they have to concur with, or they have to follow all of the IDNR regulations.
We can make that, if that's the board's choice, to be part of the final thing.
And again, I think we got the cart in front of the horse, but it's important to go through whatever we want to go through here.
Well, we gotta start somewhere, and it's up to you guys to start wherever you want to start. It's kind of what we talked about, is people talk what they have passion about. I think Greg's got something that he wants to talk about possibly, and everybody come in and just join in.
I'd like to discuss some of Dr. Schomer's findings and some of his testimony about setbacks and research that is incredibly dated. I know that there's ordinance in place for setbacks, and at some point, it's like any document, every once in a while that can be updated. And at what point can we make that happen? Because that could drastically change some of the locations.
Are you talking about the Illinois Pollution Control Board recommendations as far as sound goes? And sound limitations, is that what you're talking about?
And ZBA.
Okay, but we were just talking, we went through those, we did update ours in the last, in the last year. We sat down and went through that, but the Illinois, Dr. Schomer talked about the Illinois Pollution Control Board their limits being done in 1968, and that they didn't know there were going to be windmills at that time. My feeling there, is that what you wanted to talk about?
Yeah.
Okay. My feeling there is that there are windmills now, a lot of windmills in Illinois. The Illinois Pollution Control Board is still in existence. And they haven't done anything to change those. We just went through saying that IDNR are the experts where this is concerned, and that we're bowing to what they recommend. I have trouble, I'm not saying I couldn't be convinced, but I have trouble, based upon what I've heard so far, overriding the Illinois Pollution Control Board's recommendations and stipulations there too. As much as I've gone through Dr. Schomer's testimony and his paper that we've received, I haven't heard anything conclusive, and I haven't seen anybody grab hold of it and change regulations from it. He said there needs to be more studies done on these things, and I'm not saying there shouldn't be, but I just didn't see any real information that would change my mind there. But I'm very willing to listen.
Yeah, I think we set out the Illinois Pollution Control Board standards as our standard, and I think there's a case for somebody to go before the Illinois Pollution Control Board and say, hey, reset these standards or do whatever it is. And I think as we hear information, we can adjust even our own standards here. Like, I forget what I could pull out what section it is that says our McLean County Zoning Board standard is the Illinois Pollution Control Board. I mean, I'm sorry if that's really wrong, but we worked our butts off to find out what the right standard was, and that's what we adopted. Yeah, there may be new information out here, both on that may not be right, maybe too high, maybe too low. The other thing that is coming out, we're right on the cutting edge of all this, is that they're the low trailing edge or whatever it is. I think our old standards were lower megawatt and smaller turbines, and we didn't have these low noise blades. And there are all these innovations coming out that we may have to adjust at some point. So I'm willing to adjust on the fly as we go through this, but we're sort of, yes, both of you guys have really valid points here. And if we do find they don't fit, we can adjust our findings accordingly if we get that far.
I don't disagree with the Illinois Pollution Control Board standards as they sit. I guess what I have an issue with Mr. Hankard's report, he explained to us why he did the 2 decibel reduction. He never gave us any data that said, hey, look, I had this farm, and this farm that I did after, or went back and verified, and found that my model was 2 decibels or 3 decibels too high. He just said, in my experience, and basically trust me, that he was going to take that up. So my thoughts are that we need to take those 2 decibels and put them back in, because we have had no credible evidence, and have them recalculate with the 2 decibels back in. And anything that doesn't match the IDNR decibels. Yeah, what, yes, I get idea too many. Anyway, the Pollution Control Board standards, and basically in that 1,500 megahertz is where most of it is happening. I went through the revised report this afternoon, and basically if you add two back in there, there's 32 sites that will be at 40 decibels or over at the foundation. Now, one other area that we have a problem between our standards and the Illinois Pollution Control Board is that the Illinois Pollution Control Board says that you do it at the property line. Our standards say that we do it at the foundation line. So, and I think that their standard for that nighttime is 41 decibels. I may be wrong. I'm suggesting that anything below, it has to be 40 or below. That would take into consideration some of that area between their standard and our standard and be a little more conservative. The other thing we heard was that the ISO that they're using on this model, that there was plus or minus 3 decibels on that. So if it's that wishy-washy, I think we need to err on the conservative side towards the non-participating and non-compensated public. So.
Yeah, we're arguing about a model to boot. It wasn't like you went out and could do this, so we're arguing. So what we're talking about is a model of a model. And we're arguments with the model one way or another. So we get a bunch of academics in here. We have a pretty good time here getting entertained by Dr. Schumer and other folks going over this, but I'm not sure. We got to make some decisions on the data.
Like I said, there'd be 32 sites that would be over 40, and if you go over 40, if you go to 41, there's 7. So it's not like it's half the turbines even. You know, it's not even, doesn't even get to a third of them. Comes close.
It kind of makes you wonder if you went through all low, the other blades, whatever you call them, the acronym for it, but low trailing blades that are quieter, would it change the noise level to a point? It seemed like they were resistant to put those in. I don't know for sure if they're not as efficient a blade. It doesn't really matter to me, but if they used all of those, would they meet a standard better? And one of my thoughts was that it would be approved, just the same thing as you're saying, possibly to err on the side of being more conservative, but making sure that they use all of the best blades we can get.
Yeah, unfortunately, the data that we were given does not relate to where the receptor is. You don't know which turbines are there, so you can't go back and see if they've got the trailing, the low trailing noise blades figured for those or not. So,
Did they have any low noise trailing edge in there?
Yes.
yes.
Okay.
I think there's only 27 that don't, 27 that don't have.
Well, there are only 27. In this A10 whatever, up to 500, it was really hard to figure out which blade they were talking about.
The other thing is other alternative is go to the 3.3 because it comes down a little in height and in the blade diameter or the blade length. So it seems as though the information on it says it's a little quieter just itself. So I mean, there's more than one way to skin this cat, it looks like.
Humane Society would object to that phraseology.
I did think, I just want to make sure that we're representing it correctly. I did think Mr. Hankard put forth the California Ridge Wind Energy Project as an example of where he measured and where he used that to justify his lowering it by 2 on the 1,000 hertz, megahertz.
Mr. Luthans, he used the exact same study to show you that it didn't work, and both of them make sense to some extent. None of us are acoustic experts, and that's why I believe that we want the public to err on the conservative side here.
On the California Ridge, I don't remember that having any of the low noise trailing edge blades out there, did they? And so the other thing, well, aside from finding it highly entertaining, it took them several nights in to say there's a 3 decibel variation on this thing. It took them a long time to sort of bring that up. If we have low, I don't know what the low noise trailing edge blades cut it down. Is it a little or is it a lot? And then I thought the models that he ran were on flat surfaces, assuming flat surfaces, not assuming porous surfaces. If anybody's been to a gym or been on the river, I mean, Mark Twain commented in Huck Finn and other stories about how noise travels over water and any hard surface. So as far as erring on the thing of saying, gee, there's going to be more noise, I think we might want to look at this and say, oh, it'll be on the low edge of that noise, and I don't know.
Go ahead.
So are you saying you feel Mr. Hankard was conservative?
Yeah, I think he was conservative, because if there's a rough surface, it's going to dampen the noise quite a lot. And is quite a lot 3 decibels or 1 decibel? I really can't tell. I'm a financial analyst, but I'm not an engineer like that. So I think that was conservative, and if you have porous, he said porosity, but if you got rough surfaces, it's going to dampen the noise. The other thing is that if we could stipulate that instead of 1,500 feet away from someplace, like our statute said, we might specify a longer distance, if we really want to mitigate that.
He said that he used the flat or the hard surfaces. I agree with that, and that was his reason behind it. But he also stated that put him about 3 decibels ahead. 3 decibels more conservative. He made that statement. I heard that on tape. It registered. So if there's plus or minus 3 on the test to begin with, that may be zeroed out anyway. So if he's right on,
Or it's negative 6? I mean, it goes both.
well, I
It can
understand.
go above or below.
I understand it
There's
goes
no
both
variation.
ways,
Right.
but we have to be, I think we have to look at worst case scenario, not best case scenario. And best case scenario would be to go to the -6. Worst would be to go to the +3, and then you take off 2, and all of a sudden you're +5.
Could we examine the California Ridge energy project, the information where they were in disagreement, where Mr. Hankard said, and I don't remember, that's why I'm asking exactly where that was. Yours is all marked up, Drake, I'm hoping you have it in there. But where they pointed to, the evidence that they pointed as to why they could and why they could not, use that as a reason to reduce.
Number 7 on page 44. In summary, note, this is this big one. Yeah, SLG3. Big honker is our technical internal term. In summary, no turbine only noise level exceeds the IPCB, the Illinois Pollution Control Board standards or limits, and the average of the turbine only noise levels measured when turbine operations were at or near maximum, which is greater or equal to 14 RPMs, and at 75% power are at 45 decibels in the 500 hertz range, octave range, and 39 decibels in the 1000 hertz octave range. So none of them exceed the 39 on the one and 45 on the other. These levels are 2 decibels below the limits of 47 and 41. So if the limits are 47 and 41, I don't know, that's what that was.
47 during the daytime, 41.
I need you to turn on your microphone.
Turn your microphone.
47 is the daytime, and 41 is the night. I did some study, okay. So 28. There was a chart on page 28, 29. No, that's not, they're both on 28. And if you, that was running the line, they had run a line from 41 straight across there. I think that's where, anyway, if you draw a line straight across from the 41 at the 1000 hertz one, you've got this whole group of them up there on the right-hand side. They're up in the 47, 48 range. And that is what they were saying, how does this tell you to take 2 off?
Yeah, there are 11 over there, and that was at when the wind speeds are above 5 meters per second. And I don't know how that relates in miles per hour.
I don't have that either. You also, if you look to the left, there's at least 1 or 2, if you take that 41 line straight across there, there's a few of them to the left side where you get the small that are over the 41 also. So that was their point, was that this doesn't really prove. Not all of them are under. So why would you take 2 away?
Well, if I remember right, when he did his study on this one, he used some of that information to try to verify it. But he also said he does a model on everything he does, and every model is tweaked the next time, for lack of a word, to make sure that it gets better as it goes. And I don't know if that goes into this information or not, but I think they're trying to do the best they can. I'm not sure. I mean, like you, we always have to err on the side of safety. That's always been our policy. But I don't want to do something that isn't right either. It's a gray area.
I just want to point out that on page 44, number 7, the written summary says, in summary, no turbine-only noise levels exceed the IPCB level. And what we just looked at is turbines with residual traffic and wind. The blue dots are not turbine-only noise levels. They include the residual noise also. I think there is one in here that includes just the turbine, but that one is not it. We're not comparing what he's talking about in .7 on this chart in what I'm looking at.
Yeah, on page 28, there are several yellow boxes. I'm surprised they didn't point to these things, saying that non-turbine noises on both the 500 and, or on both of these charts are almost as high or in the high range of the decibels that they're trying to get. So a lot of them, they cluster around the 41 decibel range for both of them. So they're, just the non-turbine noise is in there that's higher. And if we were to put it together, that non-turbine noise, like a truck going by and the wind and the like, and then they have turbines, residual traffic, and wind, they do combine, but that's where the blue dots come in. The blue dots are everything combined, apparently. Refresh my memory, how far away were these studies done from the turbines?
Somewhere in there's a map that shows. I think one was set like 1,750 and 1,300, and I'm just pulling from memory because I saw it this afternoon.
They don't give the distances.
They're measuring it from the plane's home. It doesn't state the distances, but it is from the complaint, so. I'm sure it does state the distances somewhere, but I haven't. On page 11, it shows primary 1, primary 2. Those are the locations that they're talking about, the homes that they're talking about, and then it lists the distance to the nearest turbine in feet.
Yeah, which is 1,400 feet to the nearest turbine, primary 1, and 1,500 feet to the primary 2. So our standard is minimum 1,500 feet.
But what we're trying to decide is, was it a legitimate deduction of 2 decibel points based upon, this is one of the studies, and it may not be enough. I'm not saying that it is, but I just want to make sure we're representing it correctly as we're talking about it. Mr. Hanker referenced this study as one of the reasons that he took that off. So just based upon that, but making sure that we're reading everything correctly, we need to decide whether that was legitimate or not.
What I recall, he was basing it on this study, others, and his experience.
Correct.
The other part of the study is that they have two turbines going on at the same time, prime 1 and prime 2. So this is not one turbine alone. This is two turbines. We heard evidence that when you add turbines, you increase the noise. So this particular study had higher, would logically and would register from noise from two turbines. So therefore, it would be higher logically, and it does appear to be a little higher there. So at 41, that's two turbines together.
Agreed. And this is discussion for another time, not for this case, but maybe we need to have a minimum distance and meet a decibel criteria at the same time for future.
But we do have that. We have a minimum distance as well as the Illinois Pollution Control Board. And so, and everything that he's presented here, they've used those guidelines to position their current windmills. What we need to decide is the model, if the model that they've used to position those is a legit, what we feel is a legitimate model, based upon what he's told us, which is he felt he was conservative because he used hard surface. In addition, on the 500, he subtracted one. So, and I don't think anyone, the opposition didn't even, yeah, he added one on that, and they didn't argue about that at all. It was the 1,000 megahertz where he subtracted one. It subtracted two, and whether that was legitimate or not.
Well, once they threw in the ±3 last night, that's when I kind of changed my mind. Before that, I was, okay. We went on the conservative side because we figured the hard surface and all that, but then when I heard that there was the ±3, and then there was also another plus or minus that he agreed was in there also. So at that point in time, you know, we got one study out of all these years and all these studies and results. We got one, and both sides used it, and I don't know. I'm not 100% qualified to say that I'm reading this exactly 100% correctly either. So again, I'm just saying, if they'd have showed me 2 or 3 reports and said, here, look at each of these times, boom, not just one, I'd fall in line and say it was good and let's move on. But at this point in time, I don't feel comfortable with it. So depends on what the rest of the board thinks.
On page 43, there's the bottom paragraph that talks about an expanded uncertainty of 4 decibels. And so I can read that paragraph, or you guys would like to read along here. It's talking about 2 individuals going out with the same equipment, measuring at the same time. And with 95% certainty, their measured level of 40 decibels, for example, between 43 and 51. Which is even
A level of 47, right?
the range.
Right.
just an example, it could have been 41, and it would have, if it was 41, it would have been 46 and 35. Again, you got a 4 dB whoops factor going both, and it can go either way. And I think my feeling is that we have to err on the side of the people we're supposed to protect. There's just too many ifs, ands, and buts. I think you go with straight data and you don't change it.
I can go either way on this. I just want to make sure that we're looking at, it's a model that he's working with. He's an expert who's working with a model who has done this often, and this is his career. And I didn't hear from anyone else who was an expert that this is a bad thing to do.
Except Dr. Schomer, and he's got 200 and some books on this, and he said that you ought to be at 3,000 something, 3,250 feet, wasn't it? So.
Right, he said he thought that, but he didn't have any studies to show that.
He also said too, when he was asked the question, what do you think of Mr. Hanker's testimony? And he said, he's a good boy, he thought it was credible. And I think that was a very honest answer on his part. I think what he was trying to tell us is that his report was probably right. We asked him, I think you might have asked him, somebody asked him, would you do a report for us? And he said, no, I couldn't do that. And, or how long would it take? Maybe that's straight. And he said it would take me forever. So, but he said Mr. Hanker could probably do it in 2 days. So, you know, I think Mr. Schumer was very knowledgeable, but he just gave us his opinion of what he thought it ought to be. And the only expert opinion we have, unfortunately, is the applicant. You can take it as face value, or you can analyze it.
Well, he also, when he was asked, he said he wouldn't have taken the 2 decibels off, so. No.
Yeah, Schomer said that.
Schomer said that he wouldn't have taken the 2 decibels off. So between that and like I say, erring on the conservative side, that's how I got to where I'm at.
Yeah, we can discount any information we got, expert, non-expert, applicant, anybody else. So that's there. It seemed like Dr. Schomer was wanting to get the Illinois Pollution Control Board changed, which is sort of outside the scope of what we're doing. We've already set our standard as the Illinois Pollution Control Board, and we can adjust our findings by adding it, 250 feet or something like that, or raising them higher or setting a higher standard. Now, that's totally within our prerogative here. And I think Schomer, while I love Dr. Schomer's testimony and liked what he was saying, he was basically saying Hanker's well, I think in his words, a good boy. Although he's definitely a man, and he's pretty reliable at that. And Dr. Schomer seemed to say, hey, I'd like the noise levels to be lower across the board. So almost as a, I don't know, a general statement.
Let's to give Mr. Schumer, I think, yeah, that's something that needs to be taken up at state level and then brought back to us. And all we did is adopt the rules. Now, whether we're interpreting them right, I don't know. You know, that's what you're saying. We want to err on them, and we always do. So, you know, I don't have a problem with what you're saying. I'm not sure that it's warranted, but I don't know.
Yeah, there might be some stuff we can do like that, whatever those low noise plate are,
maybe some other, add a few feet, add 250 feet, just, shut up right now.
If you're gonna add distance, cause them to move the turbines from where they're at anyway. Basically the same thing I just said. Because if you take those two decibels off, to get to 40, it affects 32. To get to 41, and if you want, and 41 is the number. It's only 7 turbines. It's only 7 turbines that they, with the 2 added back in, there's only 7 turbines out of those, that revised list, that would have to be changed anyway, shape or form. So there's 7 turbines that are, with the two added back in, that are out of compliance.
There's the possibility that those could be put in as a low impact blade.
Can't tell because I
Don't
can't
know.
tell you which,
Yeah.
I can't tell you which
Not our
turbines
problem.
they are. I can tell you which receptors they are.
And how far are those from
Don't-
residences? So
don't
these
know.
suckers may be, may be far away from houses, as Dr. Schumer was saying.
I'm assuming that they're close, or they're stacked 1 or 2 or 3 in a row to where.
And I think that's a safe assumption here,
Don't know.
that we're trying to protect people.
Yeah, so, if you stay with 41, which is what the Illinois Pollution Control Board says, then there's only 7 of them that they have to deal with. There's another 25 that are above 40, which is 1 decibel difference, so, but there's 7 that are over when you add it back.
There's 7 households that are over. We don't know how many turbines that would affect, but we know it affects 7 households.
7 receptors.
7 receptors.
7 residences.
Right, and I agree with that. And I see no problem doing that. I'm all for making sure that, you know, we keep them in erroring on the conservative side. I just want to make sure that we're all clear and we're doing it for the right reasons and understanding what the study says and making a legitimate reason for doing it.
If we get that far, can we identify those 7 receptors? So we can name like turbine X, Y, and YZ and the others?
Yeah, it's any of them in there that, on that revised report that say, that in 1,000 are 39 or above.
We kind of come to a consensus on that issue, or we want to talk about some more? I'm okay with what you're saying. What do you think, Brian?
I would concur as well.
I would like to identify if any of those are on the list that were brought up from people that testified. I don't know if that included any of those. We can figure that out.
I can tell you it does. Like at least 2. I've been keeping track of the people who've come up as I mark them, and it does take at least 2 into consideration.
Okay, yeah, because I'd be in favor of lowering the DV limit and or removing.
Was 32 one of those?
Turbine 32? Yeah, it was. Well, keep in mind, we're talking receptors, so we're talking households.
Yep.
But turbine 32 was close to one of those households.
Thank you.
You want to sound in on this, Chris?
No, I'm fine.
Okay. And quiet, we want to hear from you. So what's next?
We heard a bunch of testimony on taxes. While it may be positive or negative or short-term, long-term, whatever, I don't remember anything in our statute saying we're here to drum up money for the county. I just think that, not that it's irrelevant in a very large scheme, but it's not part of what we're here to do. That isn't part of our deal.
As long as they pay their taxes, it's their problem.
I think it is, you know, it is important for us to state what our main modus operandi here, reason for being here is, you know, we like to help make sure that what people want to do with their land is safe for people. And in addition, we want to make sure we're using all of our natural resources wisely.
Speaking to that point, I know that there were some concerns about taking farmland out of production, but Phil in his report basically states the project area should remain farmland, and wind energy developments are an opportunity to preserve farmland and agricultural heritage. And basically, if you've got a 80 acre, or 160 acre, or 320 acre or larger farm, and you take 1 acre out of crop production, but you don't take it out of farm production, and that 1 acre is probably going to be it's going to be the most consistent acre you've got on the farm for revenue, and in all likelihood, with crop prices the way they are and have been, it's probably going to be the most profitable. So, you know, I'm sure that given the same circumstances, most would recognize that losing that maximum 1 acre isn't a big issue. At least it's not for me.
Well, I'd like to chime in on that. You know, as land use managers, we're trying to utilize this farmland in ways that doesn't reduce productivity. And if you take 10 of these 100 turbine farms, you just took 1,000 acres out of production. Then those little dots start to add up, and we're not placing them necessarily on the least productive land. It's some of the most productive land. So I agree. On this project, it doesn't seem like much, but we start to lose sight of that because these are starting to dot the whole map. And you know, if we could have done better, if there was a way that these would be put on less desirable land, that land will always be able to produce food. Whereas now, you know, it will not. Now, I believe in clean energy, and I believe in, you know, moving forward with projects like this when it makes sense too. I just there was a comment made about it, and I just that land's important.
We heard at the very end about easements, and we didn't hear much about easements beyond that. There's some provision about easements. If someone's in the area, they can apply for that. I don't remember anything in our statute that has to do with it, but it was a curiosity that I just wanted to ask about.
Could you clarify that question, please?
There was some mention that if someone who lives in there, a non-participating member, wanted to grant an easement, there was an application process whereby they get paid for granting that easement. And it seemed like something that was almost hidden information in here.
Are you talking about the applicant or the wind farm developer paying impacted property owners since they are being impacted?
I think that's what the easement was. I do not have enough information to go on. What it seemed to me is that there was a method by claiming that you wanted to grant an easement that someone who is not participating in the area but who is affected in the area. So they had a house in the area, but they weren't getting something,
had an opportunity to apply for this easement and apply for money, basically.
That is done by some wind farm developers, but this wind farm developer does not do it.
It was the $2,000 that you're talking about that was brought up in a closing last night.
So it was brought up in the closing as 2,000, and is it available in this farm? Or is it not available in this farm?
It is not.
I'd like to also go to the notice. It seems like this is an area where there was a wind farm application a few years back. And I think it'd be really nice that everybody gets a notice that some people have. And that it's pretty obvious that this area has been subject to wind farm discussions. We've had a full-fledged hearing on the wind farm from before. And so a lot of people talked about not getting notice of wind farms. I believe that our statute and the zoning board provides public notice for this. Number two, there was some sort of Invenergy office in Lexington, and that there was a bunch of people talking about it. So there might be a way in our statute or something else that we might ensure a broader notice goes out, but I'm not sure that the notice that went out or the information that went out was, I don't think anybody had much reason to not know about it, not know that there was a wind farm in the brewing on this.
A wind farm special use application is similar to many other special use applications that we have. And the public or applicants rely on confidentiality until an application is actually submitted. So that once it's submitted, we have to have it's noticed in the paper at least 15 days prior to the public hearing. So that's why we would have our deadlines at such and such a time. And so if somebody submits an application, whether it's for a variance or whether it's for a wind farm or for a special use for ag tourism, whatever it may be, we can't necessarily change our deadline to have it 90 days, because then all of a sudden it makes everybody in a difficult situation. So what we're faced with is at that time, then we have to send out the notices. For example, with this one, I think there may have been 400 notices that we sent out, and we have to send them out by the deadline. We send them out on a Friday, and then the notices we put in the paragraph of the newspaper that's circulated throughout the county. That comes in the Saturday paper, and then it's 2 weeks and 3 days later we have the zoning hearing. So to some extent, and then in this case, we notify the drainage districts as well as the township supervisors and the road commissioners. But we don't send notices to everybody in the township or the county.
But in sending out 400 within this area, that, especially to all of the news outlets and all of the major governmental bodies that are involved, which is essentially everyone, you've got a pretty heavy blanket of notices going out, even if it is fairly soon before, potentially soon before the hearing. You have a fairly large amount of notice going out.
Yes.
One idea. People don't take the pantograph like they used to. I mean, I've heard lots and lots of people say, well, I don't take the pantograph, any of that kind of stuff. And someone said tonight that we were talking that there's one of these big lighted signs like you see on the highway that notice construction ahead that someone has out in one of the areas advertising about vote no or whatever on some of the wind farm hearings. I believe the county probably has some of those signs in our possession out there on the east side of town, maybe. And those, when you put that notice out, if you took and pulled one of those out by the community and put that notice up and it went flashing across, then I don't think anybody would have really any excuse that they didn't know at least that amount of time in front of it.
On the application, it says the publication costs were around $18,000 or a touch over. Can you, how was that used? Was that all pantograph, or was that staff wages, or how was it?
I think it was 4 full pages in the legal notice in the pantograph.
4.
Something like that.
Could we walk through the standards at this point? Are we ready to walk through the standards? Does anybody else have anything?
I did.
I just want to say that I don't know that 400 letters for this large of an area is that much. I didn't know anything about it until I saw it in the pantograph. But I never got a letter, and most of my neighbors didn't get a letter either.
Can you help me understand why they were wanting a 1-year extension on the 2-year allotted time?
Generally, what they're required to do is they're required to get their first permit within 2 years. Sometimes things change in the economy or with their business, but every wind application that we've taken so far has made this request. And at least one of them expired anyway, but it means that they don't have to go through the tremendous publication cost and that kind of a thing to have another public hearing if they don't get it started within 3 years. But it's somewhat typical for what we've had with the previous wind farms.
Okay, thank you.
I thought we did ask that question like the first night out at the, and we talked at that time about the amount of time that it took to sign up people to buy the electricity, and that was part of what it was, I remember.
Before we get to the standards, I handed out the nuisance disclaimer, and thought maybe we might have Phil read that to us. He agreed to do that. But if you live in the county, what the nuisance disclaimer is.
This is a statement that requires a signature so that it starts off with that I certify that I am the owner of the property for this building permit to construct a single-family dwelling located in the agriculture district. I certify that I have read the following agricultural nuisance disclaimer to the agriculture district regulations contained in the McLean County zoning ordinance, and that I understand that there are permitted uses and many special uses allowed in the agriculture district that may not be compatible with the residential use in the agriculture district. I further understand that residential uses in the agriculture district are not given the same provision of services, amenities, and protection from other land uses which are afforded to residential uses by regulations of the residence districts, and that the agriculture district regulations are not intended to afford such services, amenities, and protections to residential uses located therein. So this is the disclaimer. Properties within the agriculture district are located in an area where land is used for commercial agricultural production. Owners, residents, and other users of property in the agriculture district or neighboring property may be subjected to inconvenience, discomfort, and the possibility of injury to property and health arising from normal and accepted agricultural practice and operations, including but not limited to noise, odors, dust, the operation of machinery of any kind, including aircraft, the storage and disposal of manure, the application of fertilizers, soil amendments, herbicides, and pesticides. Therefore, owners, occupants, and users of property within the agriculture district should be prepared to accept such inconveniences, discomfort, and possibility of injury from normal agricultural operations, and are hereby put on official notice that the state right to farm law may bar them from obtaining a legal judgment against such normal agricultural operations. And then it says, I understand that I established a residential use in the agriculture district and that such land use has no additional rights granted to it than is granted to other uses allowed by either permit or by special use in the agricultural district. And I certify that I have been given a copy of this attachment.
Thank you. I just thought we ought to put that on the record, because that's what people sign when they come in and build a house in the county.
How long has that practice been going on?
This was adopted in 1974.
Thank you.
So, we're at the point where we can start talking about the standards.
Give us a couple minutes to be sure that that
Well, I'm thinking too, it's about 8:30. I don't know how long this is gonna take, but if we're gonna take a break, we might, I gotta talk to my counsel here. She's been talking in my ear, but I can't hear her, so I might need a break.
Okay. Perfect.
10 minutes?
10 minutes? Don't get Daryl for 10 minutes.
So I think we're gonna take 10 minutes. Daryl's gonna put 10 minutes up there, and we'll come back and reconvene. Thank you for your cooperation tonight.